Welcome to the podcast. I am Braxton Wallace, and it has been forever since I actually recorded a podcast episode. If you're a longtime viewer of the channel, then you remember I kind of did this podcast thing called medium format. The whole point is medium format. Honestly, like first week with the name was I was just kind of poking fun at everyone in the film community. I feel like anytime anyone starts a series or a podcast or a Substack or whatever, they always have some like clever name that coincides with film photography or analog or whatever, and it's just always something, and I just thought it was funny. Have no idea if this thing will continue under the name of medium format, but I did want, as I returned to YouTube, I wanted a place to kind of just hold longer form thoughts, if you will. I'm a very long-winded person, and I'm definitely a very opinionated person, truthfully. And I just wanted a place where I could kind of put more long-form, unedited thoughts out there, and they just kind of have a place. And now with YouTube and kind of having its own like podcast tab on your channel, it makes things a lot easier. You know, that was kind of like one of the problems with medium format back in the day was that, like, you know, you post an hour and a half podcast episode alongside your normal 10-minute videos, and it would wreck all kinds of stuff, engagement, algorithm, all that good stuff. So I am going to try to be consistent with this. I'm hoping to just kind of put out like one a month, and it will just kind of be a recap of all the videos I've posted and, you know, any other thoughts that are kind of going on and, you know, whatever that, you know, don't necessarily make it into a video, or if I need to expand upon something that I kind of touched a bit more briefly in a video, all of those thoughts will live here. So, and I'm going to work on trying to distribute this, you know, to Spotify, iTunes, etc. It won't just live on YouTube. But I mean, a lot of these will just be kind of casual by myself podcast episodes and me just kind of talking. We might have a guest on every once in a while, but we'll see. But we do have a few things to talk about today. Returning to YouTube. It's a big thing. A video that I just posted most recently, it was kind of my thoughts on the new Smartflex 4x5 large format camera. Lots of thoughts there. Oh my gosh, did that video garner a lot of interesting thoughts and people, if you will. And then, of course, I kind of also want to touch a bit briefly on film as a whole and kind of where we're at with film photography going into 2025. So firstly, really quickly, I mean, I made a whole 17.5-minute video about this, but I came back to YouTube. I mean, I took a very long break, specifically, you know, making videos about photography and film photography. It feels really good to be back, if I'm being honest. I'm in a totally different place than what I was when I was making videos consistently back in the day. Financially, life-wise, relationally, emotionally, all of that good stuff. And I'm in a much different place. And I feel like now going into 2025, I'm much more suited to make videos and put them out consistently and all that good stuff. I'm much more set up for success than what I was. It was very, very difficult. And I talk all about that in my video. It was very difficult to put out videos consistently and, you know, kind of playing that whole YouTube game, and like now kind of being in a place in my life where I don't necessarily have to play that YouTube game. I mean, obviously, you know, you want to be smart about it. You know, you want a good title and thumbnail, and you want to make interesting videos and produce them well and all that stuff. But like, you know, it's not this like starvation mentality where back in the day I felt like every video had to be the most insane thing, and, you know, I had to make them better and better and better. And, you know, I'm looking at all the other people in my niche, I'm seeing how they're performing and what they're making, and I'm comparing to my channel and all that stuff. And like, I'm just like not doing that anymore. I'm just going to make videos about what I want to make. Like the Smartflex video, for example, I was seeing a lot of negativity surrounding the camera, and it really bummed me out. And I wanted to bring some positivity to the project. You know, I wanted to, you know, be like, hey guys, like maybe we should be a little bit more self-aware about what's going on. You know, I filmed that video, put it out, and like, you know, didn't even think anything of it. Like, obviously the Smartflex camera is a fairly hot topic at the moment, you know, with the Kickstarter coming out and stuff. But at the same time, like, you know, it was something that I was passionate about. And so I just filmed the video and I put it out there, and, you know, I was happy with however it performed. You know, my mic is bouncing a lot. I'm gonna try to tighten this up a little bit. There we go. So, I'm just in a much better place, and I'm very grateful to be in this place, just to be in a place where I can, put out videos and kind of make videos about whatever I want. And yeah, it's really exciting. It feels really good. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be connecting with you guys. Like, it was actually so crazy. I talk about this in my video, that one of the things that I missed the most about making videos was the community and the people who, were showing up, like repeat viewers, like being able to see the same username again and again and again in comments was super fun, and like talking to those people and connecting with those people and all that stuff. And you know what? I just posted, obviously my return to YouTube video didn't do very well. I mean, like, that's a very unoptimized YouTube video. And really that video was honestly more for me than for, for the audience. Like, I'm not special. I'm not going to sit here and think that, people really missed me, or like a large quantity of people missed me and I owed people an explanation stuff. Like, I'm not that special. It was really more for me. I just wanted to get all that off my chest and just like put it out there, just so that I can kind of almost mentally start again, if you will. But as soon as I make my Smartflex video, one of the first commenters is someone who watched all of my other videos and I connected with pretty regularly. So it was just so cool to see that, like, it almost felt like we didn't even skip a beat, So enough with YouTube. I mean, again, happy to be back, happy to be making videos again. And I can't wait to see what we do in 2025. I have a few things planned that I'm really, really excited about. Lots of video ideas, and, especially with wintertime being around and work being a lot slower. I am a full-time photographer outside of YouTube as well. In the winter months, it's too cold to shoot. So I have lots of things planned, lots of things that I'll be able to do in my free time in winter. So yeah, okay, I want to move on to the Smartflex thing. That's probably like the biggest topic of today, just because it was such I don't even know what to call it. So I made a post on Reddit, like on the analog thread on Reddit, and I basically just said that, like, I was kind of disappointed in the community, just because, I actually, for whatever reason, didn't find out. Wow, my voice is going out today. I, for whatever reason, didn't find out about the Smartflex camera until recently. I saw a lot of people talking about how they've been following the project for a long time, and it seems like the Smartflex Instagram account's been posting pretty consistently. But I, for whatever reason, and I feel like I'm fairly plugged into the community. I mean, I guess since I kind of took a step away from YouTube, I wasn't as much, but still, like, I thought I would have found out about it by now, but I didn't, which is crazy. So I immediately start, kind of researching the camera, looking at Reddit posts, Instagram posts, just trying to find any sort of discourse about this camera, because I didn't know a whole lot about it. And it was just like, I mean, obviously there was some positivity, but like, it was a lot of negativity, like a lot of negativity. And there was just like so many people being like, this is stupid. Like, oh, it's 3D printed. Oh, it's this, it's made in China. It's a Kickstarter, or it's going to do a Kickstarter. Like, just like every excuse in the world as to why this camera was stupid and we didn't need it and it was unnecessary and it would flop, and just all this stuff. And like, the more I looked into the camera, I was like, wait, like, this is actually really sick. Like a modern take on the Graflex RB, or, the B series cameras. Like, that sounds so sick. Like, why wouldn't we want this? And also, like, again, just, coming off of the Pentax 17 release and then the Mint, Rolly 35 AF release, like, all of it sounded like adding another camera on top of that sounds phenomenal. We got support for half frame 35 millimeter and large format. And, theoretically you can make an argument for medium format too, because the Smartflex has a Graflock back on it. We got support for all of the formats outside of 5x7 and 8x10. We got support for all of the formats in 1 year. And the year of 2024, film was supposed to be dead 15 years ago. Like, to me, it's so crazy that we're getting support for this very niche, and it just sucked that so many people were hating on it. And, like, it'd be different if people were bringing up, in my opinion, reasonable complaints about it. I wanted to pull up some of the comments. Here we go. I'm just going to go to the channel here. I wanted to bring up some of the comments that, like, again, what I was about to say was it'd be different, again, in my opinion, if people were bringing up reasonable criticisms of the camera. I guess you could argue that the 3D printing thing is reasonable, but my problem is that everyone's acting like the entire thing is 3D printed, and that's not true. There's lots of CNC'd metal machined parts, like all of the rollers and the gears and the springs and all that stuff is all metal. They have, it's also made out of like carbon fiber. There's carbon fiber plates and all that stuff. And they've been very transparent about the fact that they've, made multiple pass-throughs to make sure everything is structurally sound. So they're reinforcing all the 3D printed parts as well. Not to mention that, like, yeah, 3D printed's not the best in like hot weather, cold weather, etc. But like, let's not act like it's going to just fall apart the second you take a photo. So I found that to be a little unreasonable. Again, I think it'd be different if you were just making, the general complaint that they wish it was all metal or whatever, but that's so hard to do, especially, when you don't have the upfront capital to put together a full assembly line and all that stuff. Like when you're doing like a small production run like this, like 3D printing's like your best option. And I'd rather have a 3D printed camera than no camera at all. You know what I'm saying? So, but all of these other, or a lot of these other complaints, in my opinion, were very just unreasonable. Like I talk about in the video that I find it silly to, and maybe I should have made this point a bit more clear, but I find it kind of silly to sit there and compare it to like a normal 4x5 view camera. Like it doesn't have movements. I think it technically has a ground glass to look through, but I mean, like like a background glass like you would through a view camera. But, it's a TLR, so it's made to look through the top, or not a TLR, it's built like a TLR. It's a single lens reflex. Sorry, I know people are going to come after me for that. But, you look through the top ground glass, not the background glass like a view camera. Again, you don't have movements. Like, this is a much different camera than a view camera. And to sit there and like compare it to view cameras is silly in my opinion. And all these people are like this dude who, there was one person who was like, this is so stupid. I can get a much better camera out of an Intrepid, and I could build this for cheaper just with Intrepid parts and all that stuff. I'm like, Intrepid makes view cameras. It's a completely different camera. Like, if you want that, go get the Intrepid. Like, don't sit here and be like, oh, I would never buy this because it doesn't do what my Intrepid does. Well, yeah, because it's a different camera. Like, the people who are buying this camera don't want the things that you get with a 4x5 view camera. I talk about this in the video. Like, there's more to large format photography than just movements and, all that good stuff. Like, there's more to it. Not to mention that, like I talk about in the video, I'm not even interested in like really shooting it like a large format camera. Like, yeah, it's nice to get access to that huge negative and to, have all that resolution, tonality, etc. But like, I'm more excited the fact that it's a one-stop shop for a lot of formats. The fact that I can shoot 4x5 and then turn around and shoot 6x12, 6x9, etc. Like, the fact that I can do all that, very sick in my opinion. So, again, I feel like a lot of these complaints are very unreasonable. I'm trying to see if I can find any other, if there's any other like complaints that I thought were like super unreasonable. A lot of people are talking about the price. And, I brought up in my video that, adjusted for inflation, it's basically the same price, if not cheaper than what the original Graflex RB was back in, 1925 or whatever when it came out. And people are like, it doesn't matter if it's adjusted for inflation or not. Like, wages didn't track, like, blah, 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 blah. Like, point still stands. This camera's never been cheap. Okay? Like, let's not sit here and act like wages haven't tracked that much. Like, I promise you, buying a 100 and... What did my video say? Let's put my video. I'll mute it so it doesn't ruin the audio. but somewhere in my video, let's see. Yeah, ranged from $80 to $160. And then you adjust that for inflation. $80 adjusted for inflation as of November of 2024 is $1,502.35. $160, so low end and top end of that range. $160 of January 1923, because the camera released in 1923. As of November 2024 is $3,004.70. So body only for the Smartflex is $1,989. So depending on what you got from the factory, the Graflex back in the day was more expensive. I promise you that a $160 camera in the 20s hurt a lot for someone who needed to buy the camera. Like, you know, obviously it's when we're talking about professionals, like it's part of doing work, like it's a business expense, etc., whatever. And that's kind of how I look at it, because I am a full-time photographer. Like, this is my job. But even still, like, let's not sit there and act like that was a small amount of money back then. Like, oh, wages just tracked better. Like, no, it was still a lot of money. Okay. So like, this camera's always been expensive. Did you expect it to be $400? Like, yeah, part of it's 3D printed, but there's lots of parts of it that's not 3D printed. Not to mention the engineering that has gone into this camera. They have to design all of this. And again, let's not sit here and act like the entire camera is 3D printed. There's lots of CNC machine parts. There's carbon fiber parts. You know, they've put in very ingenious engineering designs, like with their Instax back, because of flange distances and stuff. The ground glass at the top can move up and down so that you can still focus, depending on if you're shooting with the Instax back or with, you know, a regular film back. You know, all that stuff, like, yeah, this thing's going to be expensive. Not to mention that, you know, it takes a lot of money to make anything these days. Like, you want to talk about inflation, everything costs more now. So the cost of manufacturing is also going to be more. Like, it's not cheap to make a new camera these days. Like, did you expect that they could just make it for $200 and sell it for $400 or something? No. Like, that's so not reasonable or feasible in today's society. So I just, like, you know, again, I know you can't make everyone happy, but I feel like it was just so unreasonable to expect this camera to be, you know, maybe you could make an argument that it could be a bit cheaper. I do know, according to their Kickstarter, that the pricing, let me find it down here, somewhere in their Kickstarter, they do mention that the first round of pricing, let's see, after sales service, yeah, pricing the camera plus lens bundle at $2,900. After the Kickstarter, the price will increase to $3,400 to maintain profitability. We want everyone to enjoy the cameras and lenses we built. However, creating them has required immense effort, dedication, and investment. While they won't be extremely cheap, we have worked hard to make them accessible to most users. Yes, okay. Our current Kickstarter pricing with no profit margin is specifically crafted for these bold and visionary individuals who trust and support us. The Kickstarter pricing has no profit margin built in. So if we're taking them at their word, unless they're lying to us, but, you know, for the sake of humanity, let's take them at their word. If they're pricing everything at cost, it's costing them $2,000 a unit, basically. If they're selling body only for $1,989, that's how much it's costing them to produce these cameras. Like, people over here are saying that I can make this for half the cost. No, you can't. No, you can't. Not with the CNC parts and stuff that they're making this camera with. That's not possible, and you're lying to yourself if you truly believe that. You could make some 3D printed light sealed box, but you can't make it with their segmented mirror system and Graflock back and everything else that goes into this camera. No way. You're lying to yourself if you believe otherwise. Unless you have a very hyper niche life or access to CNC machines and you have the materials to make all of this stuff. So, yeah, I I want to scroll through these comments really quickly to see if there's any other like big criticisms. You know, you definitely had the people who criticized like, oh, just buy like an OG Graflex, you know, all that stuff. And no, like those things are literally falling apart. Like I know plenty of people who have these and they talk about how they can't like hold the strap because it's so dry rotted that it will just, you know, fall out of your hand. They talk about how the chimney viewfinder falls apart. The internals, yeah, even if it was, you know, good engineering back in the day, like it's very old. You got to send it out for a CLA. I was told, someone brought up the fact that they have a Graflex RB that came from the factory with a Graflock back and not a Graflex back. But according to my research and the people that I've talked to, it was quite rare for the B series to come with a Graflock back. I was told that almost always they were shipped with a Graflex back, and if you wanted a Graflock back, you had to do modification in the secondary market or whatever, or you had to send it back to them. Very rarely were you able to actually get one from the factory with a Graflock back. Someone said that they had one from the factory with a Graflock back. I don't know if I believe them, or they probably do, but you know, that just definitely contradicts what I've researched and what I've read. I even double checked with a quick ChatGPT search as well, and ChatGPT also agreed with me, so take that with a grain of salt. So don't know about that, but you know, maybe it brings up a better point that I said in the video that I'm taking a newly manufactured camera over one that's 100 years old. And I think what I was trying to get at with that, I get the point that, you know, they were better built back in the day because they had the resources and, you know, assembly lines and everything else to consistently produce quality cameras. Like in today's day and age, like you know, quality control probably wouldn't be as good and stuff. And like, I get that, but also at the same time, what I think a better point to make would be if the camera's being produced now in the current day, that means that it has a better chance of being repaired. There's better chances of parts being out in the wild, and you have a better chance of getting support for it. Another thing, kind of bringing back to the Graflex B series, was a lot of people complained about that it's actually quite difficult to find someone to work on these cameras. I even read, this is anecdotal, but I read a Reddit post or something not that long ago that one of the main people who had access to a lot of the old Graflex parts and stuff, and they had like a whole like warehouse and all that, it burned down and they lost almost everything. I think he was like a dude who like built custom Graflex RBs for people, I think. But so anecdotally, there's already plenty of people complaining about the fact that it's hard to get the Graflex repaired. And so you have a new camera with fresh parts, even if say like the quality control isn't great, you still have updated support for the camera, whereas you don't, you know, now. Like I made the point in the video, if my Pentax 6.7, if it broke, or sorry, I'm misspeaking. If I had a Pentax 6.7 from 1969, like I do, and then Pentax made a new one tomorrow, I'm taking the one tomorrow. Yeah, my Pentax 6.7 has held up well, but the second that it breaks, what am I supposed to do? There's a few people who work on Pentax 6.7s, but I know they're kind of hit or miss because they do have some electronics in there. I know like the earlier models are easier to work on than like the 6.7 II, but like point stands is that if Pentax made a new Pentax 6.7 with new modern parts and stuff, that camera would be easier to get support for than my older one. That's simple supply and demand in the current state of how it is. It's getting increasingly harder to get your cameras repaired. That's why I'm a big advocate for mechanical cameras, because mechanical cameras are easier to repair. Someone's going to fight me on that too, I know that, but according to all the technicians that I've talked to, it's easier to repair mechanical cameras than non-mechanical cameras. I mean, there's a reason why, you know, people are refusing to work on, you know, the T3s of the world and all that good stuff. Like the Contax T3s, the Yashica T4s, like those are point and shoots and stuff, but they're heavily electronic cameras. You know, I even have a friend who has an RZ, and he said that it was incredibly difficult to find someone to work on his RZ. You know, it's just getting harder and harder and harder to get these cameras repaired and fixed and supported and all that stuff, because the supply is just dwindling. You know, we have to cannibalize cameras to get parts for other cameras, and at some point the supply is going to dry up. Okay, I honestly, like, reading through these comments is kind of a hellhole, to be honest with you. Some of these are really positive and stuff, but you know, I feel like a lot of these comments also are just like people trying to just like take a dig at me in some way. Like, they're just like itching to find something incorrect in this video. Like, the people are just dying for me to make a mistake, or they're me trying to make a moot point or something. Like, one person brought up the fact that my point about it's harder to build assembly lines and all that stuff in today's age. They said like it wasn't applicable. They said much of the remarks about cost increase related to tooling and training employees to generate substantial out is not applicable. Over whatever its life may be, this camera will probably only have a production of less than 500 units. They will be built to order. They do not need a warehouse, allowing necessary recovery or R&D. Having to manufacture their own shutter and tooling for some of the larger parts, the price is not that surprising. In my opinion, they should have just copied the Graflex in 4x5 TLR. Blah, 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 blah. That then they say, you know, a lot of people also said this, which I find just so funny. Frankly, I doubt there is a market for use of this camera, although some will be sold to curious and large format users who don't like to hike a 4x5 or larger rig. A lot of people in these comments have said that there's no market for this and that this is too niche and this is stupid. As of January 1st, 11:12 a.m., the Kickstarter has raised $209,448 US dollars. What do you mean there's no market? It's raised over $200,000. And then people will move the goalposts and be like, "Oh, well, that's actually not a lot of money in the grand scheme of manufacturing a camera." Shut up. Like, shut up. Like, $200,000 for manufacturing a 4x5 film camera in 2025 now is a lot of money. We wouldn't have been able to raise $200,000 for a camera back in 2012 when the film bubble was at its lowest. No way. Like, there's obviously a market for this, but I want to go back really quickly to the other part. It's just like trying to point out like a niche thing of like, oh, like the assembly line point doesn't make sense because it's made to order and all that stuff. Like, people are just like grasping at straws to try to be negative in some way. Like, it just feels like people are just desperate to be negative in some way. But also I feel like my point still stands. As of right now, we have 72 backers, so that means they have to produce 72 units. But that's just on the Kickstarter. That's not talking about, post Kickstarter and they start releasing, to the open market, if you will. They talked about opening up an eBay store and then also selling directly on their website and stuff. Not to mention that they're based overseas in Japan, China. So we're talking about a national sale of this camera. And obviously, say what you want about Kickstarter, there is a bit of risk, if you will, because Kickstarter doesn't hold sellers responsible for actually delivering a product. So I know some people are hesitant to back a Kickstarter because they've been burned in the past or they've read stuff or whatever. So I actually feel like this 72 number is quite low for what this camera will end up doing units wise. The fact that it raised over $200,000 on Kickstarter when people, given the risk of a Kickstarter, I think it's actually quite positive. And I think this number of backers will actually increase by a lot once this camera hits open market. And if that's the case, yeah, they're going to need some sort of system to assemble this camera. It can't just be this project is headed by two people. It's not just going to be them two sitting in a basement assembling this camera by hand. Like, they posted an Instagram photo. Excuse my keyboard clacking. They posted an Instagram post earlier today showing, I don't know if you're going to be able to see this if you're watching this on YouTube, but they posted a photo of their 3D printers, they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They have 8 3D printers is what it looks like I'm looking at right now. And I see all the parts for the camera kind of like on the floor right now. Yeah, they're going to have some sort of at least small to medium scale assembly line to get this manufactured and built. They're going to have to train people to assemble this camera. Multiple people at once are going to have to assemble this camera. Like, yeah, it's going to be expensive to get that up and running. You got to pay people. You got to, train people. All of that costs money. It doesn't matter if it's 10 people or if it's 100 people, like what it used to be back in the day, or thousands of people. Like, either way, again, keeping things like inflation in mind and all that stuff, yeah, it's going to be expensive to pay people to sit down and manufacture and build a camera by hand. It's not cheap. So again, people just like, even if they don't have like an actual reasonable criticism of the camera, they're just going to point something out just to be negative. I feel like, now I could be missing something. I probably should have prepared a little bit more for this podcast episode. But off the top of my head, the only reasonable criticism I saw of this camera, outside of, I don't disagree with the fact that it would be better if it was like no 3D printed parts. If it was all metal, all aluminum, all carbon fiber, etc. Yeah, that would be better. I'm not disagreeing with that, but I feel like people are just a little too scared of the 3D printing thing. Like, I'd rather have it 3D printed than not have the camera at all. But I wonder if I can pull it up. The one criticism that I do remember off the top of my head was, let's see if I can search. It had to do with the focal length. If I search like wide angle, it said like wide angle in there. Okay, yeah, it was this comment. Right off the main problem, impossible to shoot with wide angle and super wide lenses. Unless there is a mirror lockup and deep recessed lens boards, which make it impossible to reach lens controls, you are stuck with maybe 127mm lens max. So this looks like this looks like a specialized portrait camera for high-end shoots. Where Graflex failed was their viewfinder rangefinder system, excellent and accurate viewfinder for field work with the option of super wide shooting and tripod work. That's the perfect large format film camera. I actually find that to be a very reasonable criticism, and I agreed with them. I said, why won't it show me my response? It wouldn't show me my response for some reason. I think it's because of the search filter. But anyway, my response was basically, actually, yeah, that's a reasonable criticism. I mean, like, thankfully for me, I bought the kit that comes with their lens with it, the Smartnon 178. I bought that kit together, and for me and my work, I actually really love 50. I love 50 for landscape. I love it for portraits. I actually really love like that. There's that 40 to 50 range. I love, like, I shoot the 90mm 2.8 on my Pentax 6.7 all the time. Love that focal range. So for my, for kind of more of my style of landscape work, I'm not really like a traditional landscape photographer. I do a lot more like rural, kind of new topographic style, kind of not really. Like, I do a lot more like kind of like singular vignette instead of like wide angle landscape stuff. So it works great for me. Like, I don't really need a wider lens. I would love a wider lens. Like, I would love to have the flexibility to shoot with a 35mm equivalent or something like that. But I think that's a super reasonable criticism. No one's talking about that, though. He's the first person I've ever seen to actually comment on that. And I got verification on their Kickstarter. What's the widest lens you can shoot with on this camera? And they said, if you're asking about infinity focus, it would be the Smartnon we designed with the actual focal length of approximately 170 to 178mm. For portrait distances, I've used the SMC 165 2.8. They, at one point, I believe, were using the 165 from the Pentax as kind of like a prototype lens for this camera. And then for macro photography, I've used the Zeiss 135 3.5T. So I think that's a reasonable criticism. Also, one of probably my biggest criticism of the camera is the fact that it doesn't have a threaded shutter button for a shutter release cable. So the fact that I'm going to have to push the shutter button every time instead of use a shutter release cable if I'm using it on tripod stuff is pretty annoying to me. Or if I'm just using slow shutter as a whole, I actually quite dislike that. And I'm interested to see how that'll go for me. But again, all that to say, I feel like it'd be one thing if we're bringing up reasonable criticisms of the camera. I think I had a part in my video where I talked about that, and I think I might have cut it out. But again, like this whole mindset of like, this is so stupid, we don't need this. Like someone actually left a comment this morning, I think. This comment actually doesn't make a whole lot of sense. They said, but it's a 4x5 and we already have tools in 3D printer. There's no need for this camera. I feel like YouTube shooter aren't really locked in. I don't know what that second part means, but I get the merit of what they were saying at the beginning of like, we already have the tools and 3D printers and stuff. We don't need this camera. And I feel like that mentality is going to kill film photography sooner than what it needs to. Like this whole, like every time something comes out, this is stupid, we don't need it. Like the Pentax 17 response and example was the best example of this. So many people are like, oh, it's so stupid that they're making a half frame camera. Like they should have just made a 35 millimeter or a medium format camera, blah, 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 blah. Like they're making a new film camera. They're putting a product out there that keeps film alive. Complaining every time something doesn't exactly solve your problems is just going to kill film. Because again, if we keep crapping on these product releases, manufacturers are eventually going to be like, oh yeah, like people hate it every time we put something out. Maybe people really don't like film. Like these like super cynical, nihilistic, old film shooters are going to kill film. Like it'll never be what it was back in the 1960s when you were shooting film. I'm so sorry. Like cameras have changed, film has changed, the economy has changed, all of it's changed. This is what film photography is now. Yeah, cameras are going to be partly 3D printed. Yeah, we're going to have to do Kickstarters. Like the thought that we need to crap on every release that doesn't solve all of our problems and just like twiddle our thumbs and wait for the day that Pentax starts putting out Pentax 673s and, you know, Mamiya comes back as a company and they start putting out Mamiya 7.3s and Nikon decides to start producing film cameras again and they put out an F, you know, what are they on, F7 they would be? Like, that makes no sense. Like, well, oh yeah, so we're going to hate on every single camera that gets released. And instead, what we're going to do is we're just going to wait until a camera manufacturer just puts out the camera that we actually want. But the camera that we really want is the most difficult thing in the world to manufacture and would not make any money at all. Makes no sense. Makes no sense. Like Pentax making a Pentax 673 in today's age sounds incredible. That would be so expensive to develop. So expensive to develop. And they would have to sell it for a lot of money. And if people aren't willing to spend $3,000 on the Smartflex, they're definitely not going to be willing to spend the money on a Pentax 673. I'm willing to bet that a Pentax 673 would be nowhere near under $5,000. We're talking $5,000 plus easily, in my opinion, if not more, especially with lensing and stuff. Like, that would be so expensive. So I'm rambling at this point. I'm just like, it's just so irritating that like people are so negative when there's innovation in the space. And like, there's people out there who actually care about film photography and are willing to, you know, the Smartflex people have been very transparent about the fact that they're putting a lot of their own money up front. Apparently one of the main people behind it run a photo booth business in China. And so they're just using their resources and their money and all that stuff. This is just like a passion project for them. They're not looking to make a lot of money. They've talked about that on their Kickstarter and stuff as well. Like, we're crapping on the people who actually care about film photography and want it to stick around. It's just sad. It's just sad. But, you know, it is what it is. I'm glad that like the video did well though. Like it got a lot of traction, and outside of the really negative comments, there's also been some pretty decent discussion in there as well. And a lot of people being like, you know, people having the proper response that you should to a product like this. you know, there's been plenty of people who are like, you know, I don't shoot film anymore. I never shot large format, and I don't know what a Graphlog back is, but I'm absolutely enthusiastic about this camera. When I have some spare cash, I might buy one and try 4x5 for the first time in my life, and I might like it. And then they criticize me about something that I didn't even say. I said in the video. They say, by the way, large format has no more compression than small format. Lenses don't determine compression, distance does. I literally said that in the video that I didn't want to explain it because I feel like every time I explain it, a different person says I'm wrong. Don't know why you needed to put that in there. But, or like this comment, this is exciting. We need more sophisticated new cameras like this for film. I'm tired of seeing so many of these new cheap point and shoot film cameras. The price for this camera is not that high. Someone who buys this camera probably owns other large format cameras. Yeah, like, you know, just be happy. You know, even if you don't want to buy the camera, at least you could just be like, you could be exactly what my response was for the Pentax 17. I was like, I don't like half frame. I don't plan to ever shoot half frame. That negative is just way too small for me. But I'm glad that Pentax is supporting film and we're getting new film cameras. And, you know, I'm very happy to support verbally online, give it positive thoughts, positive ratings, whatever, you know, support these new film projects that are few and far between, but also recognize that it's not for me and I will not be spending my dollars on it because I don't have a use for it. Like, you can say, I don't have a use for this and or I don't want to put my dollars towards this, but it's cool that someone's doing this. That's all you got to do. You don't have to sit here and compare it to your 1943 Graflex Crown press camera that has front standard movements and can do this and this and this, and I can still put a roll film back on it, blah, blah, blah. It was much better quality. I don't need this, but like, no one cares. Like, what? I don't get it. Like, people just want to be so negative. Okay, enough of that. I think this brings, lastly, how long have I been recording for? 42 minutes. Great. Okay, got to wrap this up fairly soon. I think lastly, I think this brings up a good kind of topic on, is film dead? You know, outside of the Smartflex, we've had a few other developments, such as, you know, film prices going up again, which is tough. But do I think film is dead going into 2025? No, I don't. I do think that film is changing again, though, you know, kind of looking back at over the last, say, like 5 years of film photography. You know, it was starting to kind of like catch steam, you know, people were shooting, you know, I feel like we kind of went through an era for a little bit where film itself was still really, really cheap, but people were starting to kind of, you know, get back into it, if you will. Like, there was definitely like a dark ages where, you know, that like kind of, I believe it's like 2012 through like 2016, 17-ish, where like film was selling for pennies and it was super cheap to shoot and there was not a lot of support for it. Kodak was going down hard. I do remember when Kodak had to get that government contract to start manufacturing, I believe it was like medicine, just to like subsidize the rest of their company because they were going down so hard. You know, Fujifilm obviously canceled 400H and 800Z and just like all of that stuff. But after that, I believe maybe, and I could have my time errors wrong. You know, I feel like everyone kind of has their years messed up post-COVID, but I feel like it was around like 2017, 2018 when people really started to kind of get back into film. But it was still really, really cheap to shoot film. And so that was like a great time to shoot film. But then, you know, prices started to go up and up and up and up, and it started to get a bit, you know, healthier and healthier. And then like supply got really low and, you know, they were starting to jack up film prices or whatever. And then like, I feel like it was around like 2021, like post COVID where, 2020 was mostly COVID, some 2021. And then like going into 2022, COVID was basically done. So half of 2021 going into 2022, you know, film prices were kind of like at an all-time high, and it was getting so expensive to shoot. And the film bubble was just like at its all-time high. Like everyone was desperate to shoot film. I feel like I'm rambling. Point is that, we've kind of had this era where film has just been changing over the years. It was really cheap, and then it was really expensive, and then supply was really low, and then Kodak put more out there, and then Kodak brought back Gold 200, and then, film bubble got at an all-time high, and like I just believe that film bubble is definitely going down, and the landscape is changing again. Obviously we're getting more support now, at least on the camera front. We did get Gold 200, and then Ilford brought out Kent Mirror in 120, which is also really cool. Harman also released Phoenix 200. I know that's kind of been a bit hit or miss because it was a bit more experimental, if you will. But yeah, I think it's just changing. I think the film bubble's definitely gone down. I definitely noticed that camera prices have gone down a bit, like used market and stuff. Like Mamiya 7s have been much cheaper than what they have been in the past. Pentax 6.7s have gone down a little bit. Leicas are kind of hit or miss here and there. You can find a deal every once in a while. Leica also reissued the M6, which was cool. It was really expensive, but really cool. So like all in all, like the landscape's just going to change again. Film's not dying. It's not going anywhere, at least not for the foreseeable future. I think it'll eventually get a bit cheaper. Like I think we're starting to kind of stabilize a bit, especially with Kodak. They either like renovated a factory or made a new one or something along those lines in November of 24. So I think supply is starting to kind of, even out a bit. And once supply evens out, yes, they've increased prices again, but I think at some point it's going to stabilize. And if anything, it might go down a little bit. And I think now we're at the point now where we're finding a new normal in the parasocial relationship between digital and film today. I feel like film has now kind of established itself, not only amongst, consumers, casuals, etc. You're also seeing it in professionals as well. I mean, like, I am a quote unquote professional photographer. That's what I do for a living. And I'm still shooting a ton of film. I'm not shooting all film. I still shoot digital as well. But we're now just finding the new normal between film and digital and how do they coexist in today's age. It was all digital. And then during the height of the film bubble, it was all film. You were the coolest photographer ever if you shot film. People were putting, film photographer in their bio and all that stuff. And now it's kind of died down and people have kind of, the people who, didn't last very long have kind of gone back to their digital cameras. The film photographers have stayed with their film. Some people have kind of dabbled in between. I mean, I do that for work, but I've also kind of done it personally with like my Leica Q and stuff. You also see photographers like Kyle McDougall, someone who I really respect, has, kind of bounced between film and he kind of dabbled with the GFX series for a while. So we're just finding the new normal and, it's not quite set in stone what that'll be. That remains to be seen, but film's not dying. Film's just fine. If anything, it's the healthiest it's ever been with supply and manufacturing and all that stuff. There's even rumors that Fuji has even recently restarted production on some of their films as well, which is really exciting. So film bubble's not as high as it's been, but at the same time, I feel like it's starting to stabilize a little bit. Yeah, film's going even more in cost. But again, that's just they're just trying to find stability as well as a company. It's not cheap to do all this stuff and, they need to find their own stability. And so they're doing that through price increases to make sure that profitability is stable. So once they find that and, the market kind of calms down a bit, we will find that new normal. And I think film's here to stay for a while, as long as super negative people stay away from film and, we continue to support it. I don't want film to go anywhere. I love film. I feel like I'm a better photographer when I'm shooting film, and I think it's here to stay. All right. I hope I covered all of the thoughts that I wanted to in this podcast. If you made it this far, thank you so much. I hope to do these at least maybe once a month. just to kind of like recap thoughts, ideas, videos that I've made, etc. I have a few exciting videos coming out soon. By the time this podcast released, I don't think I would have posted my panoramic photos in Joshua Tree. So if you're listening to this, you get a little sneak peek at my next video. I got that video coming out. I went and shot an abandoned town in the state of Mississippi, which is really cool. And I also have a What's in My Camera Bag 2025 video coming out fairly soon. So super exciting stuff. Very excited to get through all of that. And then, once I get through all of that, I'll post another podcast episode again, just kind of recapping thoughts and having long form ideas out there, and me honestly just rambling for a while. So if you enjoy and you listen, let me know so I can keep making these. But in the meantime, thank you so much for watching this one. And that's it. I'll see you in the next podcast episode. See ya.